The rain hammered against the window like 1,000 unspoken accusations, each drop a reminder of the life Riley had let slip through her fingers. She clutched the edge of the kitchen counter, her knuckles white. As the voicemail played for the third time, "Riley, it's over. I can't do this anymore." In that moment, the apartment that had once echoed with laughter now swallowed her whole. A hollow shell where every corner whispered of betrayal and the fragile illusion of forever. Riley Harper had always believed in the quiet strength of Portland's relentless drizzle, how it washed the city clean and coaxed green from the gray. But on that October morning in 2024, as the sky wept without mercy, the rain felt like an accomplice to her unraveling. She was 28, a graphic designer with a penchant for sketching wildflowers in the margins of her notebooks, her life a careful mosaic of coffee shops and craft markets along the Willamette River. Born and raised in the shadow of Mount Hood, Riley carried the Pacific Northwest in her bones, the scent of damp earth, the hush of fog rolling in from the coast, the unyielding pull of solitude that could either heal or hollow you out. Her breakup with Theo had come like a sudden squall, fierce and unforeseen. They'd met 3 years earlier at a farmer's market in Alberta Arts District, where he'd charmed her with stories of his backpacking trips through the Cascades. He was the kind of man who filled silences with easy charisma, his dark hair perpetually tousled, his laugh a bridge over her quieter waters. Riley had fallen hard, convinced that love was the steady burn of a hearth fire, warm against the chill of Oregon winters. But lately, the fire had sputtered, fed by his late nights at the tech startup and her growing sense of invisibility. The fights had started small, missed anniversaries, forgotten promises, until they erupted into accusations that left scorch marks on her heart. "It's not you," Theo had said the night before, his voice flat over the phone, as if reading from a script he'd rehearsed in his mind. "It's the distance. We've grown apart." Riley had pressed the receiver to her ear so tightly it bruised, searching for the lie, the loophole, anything to pull him back. But there was only static, then silence. She hung up and wandered the apartment like a ghost, trailing her fingers over the bookshelves they'd built together from reclaimed wood, the mismatched mugs from their road trip to the Oregon coast. The place on Northeast Killingsworth Street, with its exposed brick walls and potted ferns, had been their sanctuary. Now it was a mausoleum. She sank onto the worn leather couch, pulling her knees to her chest, the oversized sweater Theo's, ironically swallowing her frame. Her hazel eyes, flecked with gold like autumn leaves, stared blankly at the watercolor she'd painted of Cannon Beach at sunset, now leaning crookedly against the wall. The waves in the painting crashed eternally, a frozen roar that mocked her stillness. How had she missed the signs? The way his gaze had drifted during dinners at Screen Door, lingering on his phone instead of her stories about freelance gigs or hikes in Forest Park. The subtle shift from we to I in his sentences, like sand eroding beneath her feet. Tears came then, hot and unbidden, carving paths down her cheeks. Riley didn't cry easily. She was the friend who patched wounds with humor and herbal tea, the one who dragged you out for sunrise yoga on the East Bank Esplanade when the world felt too heavy. But grief has no mercy for the steady ones. It clawed at her chest, a vice tightening with every breath, whispering that she was unlovable, that the quiet parts of her, the sketches unfinished in her journal, the dreams of opening a small print shop in the Pearl District, were burdens, not gifts. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, jolting her from the spiral. Evie's name lit the screen, a beacon in the dim light filtering through the rain-blurred panes. Evelyn Monroe, her best friend since freshman year at Portland State University, where they'd bonded over late-night study sessions in the campus coffeehouse, trading secrets over steaming lattes. Evie, with her sharp wit and southern lilt from a childhood in Asheville, North Carolina, had always been Riley's anchor. They'd weathered everything together: Riley's parents' messy divorce when she was 16, Evie's coming out at 22 amid family silences that echoed like thunder in the Appalachians. "Ry? Talk to me." Evie's voice poured through the speaker, warm as bourbon on a winter night, laced with that faint drawl that made even worry sound like poetry. Riley choked on a sob, the words tumbling out in fragments. The fight, the voicemail, the emptiness gnawing at her edges. Evie listened without interruption, her breath steady, a lifeline across the miles. She was in Seattle now, working as a barista and budding novelist, her manuscript about lost girls in the Smoky Mountains tucked away in drawers like hidden wildflowers. "Pack a bag," Evie said finally, her tone brooking no argument. "I'm coming down. Tonight." "You're not doing this alone." By evening, the rain had softened to a mist, veiling the city in silver. Riley paced the apartment, folding clothes she had no intention of wearing, brewing chamomile tea that went cold untouched. The clock ticked past 9 when the doorbell chimed, a sound so foreign in the quiet it startled her. She opened the door to Evie, drenched from the downpour, her auburn hair plastered to her forehead, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. At 29, Evie was a study in contrasts, tall and willowy, with porcelain skin dusted by faint freckles across her nose, emerald eyes that sparkled with mischief or deepened with empathy. She wore a faded flannel shirt over jeans, boots caked in city grime, and that smile crooked, knowing that could disarm the darkest mood. Without a word, Evie dropped her bag and pulled Riley into a hug, her arms strong from years of hauling espresso machines and hiking the trails of Olympic National Park. Riley melted against her, inhaling the scent of rain and vanilla from Evie's shampoo, the world narrowing to this one solid point of contact. "I've got you," Evie murmured into her hair, her voice a soft rumble against Riley's temple. Always. They spent the night on the couch, a tangle of blankets and half-eaten takeout from Pine State biscuits, fried chicken sandwiches that tasted like comfort, greasy and golden. Evie talked her through the worst of it, coaxing out the details Riley had buried, the way Theo had stopped kissing her forehead in the mornings, how their shared dreams of a cabin in the Cascades had faded like old photographs. "He didn't see you." "Right," Evie said, her fingers tracing idle patterns on Riley's arm. "Not the real you. The one who paints sunrises like they're secrets only she knows." Riley nodded, exhaustion pulling at her eyelids, but sleep was a distant shore. As the clock struck midnight, Evie shifted, propping her head on her hand. "Remember that summer in Astoria? When we drove out to the wreck of the Peter Iredale, and you said the rust was like scars that told stories?" Her eyes held Riley's, green depths reflecting the lamplight like forest pools. "This is your story now. And it's not over." In the quiet that followed, Riley felt the first crack in the armor of her pain, a sliver of light, faint but insistent. Evie stayed until dawn, her presence a balm, turning the apartment from a tomb to a tentative haven. But as the sun crested the horizon, gilding the wet streets in gold, Riley wondered if healing could be this simple. A friend, a shared silence, the rain easing into something like grace. The days blurred into a rhythm of tentative normalcy. Evie extended her stay, calling her boss at the Seattle cafe to cover shifts, unpacking her duffel into the spare room that doubled as Riley's studio. Mornings began with coffee brewed strong and black, the aroma mingling with the earthy petrichor seeping through the cracks. They'd walk to the Saturday market on the waterfront, weaving through stalls of handmade jewelry and organic heirloom tomatoes, Evie's laughter cutting through the fog like a bell. "Look at this," she'd say, holding up a jar of wildflower honey, her eyes alight. "Tastes like the meadows back home in the Blue Ridge." Riley smiled, the motion rusty but real, her hand brushing Evie's as they paid. There was safety in these moments, a sisterly ease honed over a decade of shared heartaches and triumphs. Yet beneath it, something stirred, a warmth that pooled low in her belly when Evie's gaze lingered a beat too long, or when their shoulders bumped on the narrow sidewalk. Riley dismissed it as gratitude, the rebound of a bruised heart latching onto the familiar. One evening, as October deepened into amber hues, they hiked the trails of Hoyt Arboretum, leaves crunching underfoot like whispered confessions. The air was crisp, laced with pine and the faint smoke of distant bonfires. Evie paused at a overlook, her breath visible in the chill, and turned to Riley with a seriousness that stilled the wind. "You deserve more than scraps, right? More than someone who packs up and leaves when the road gets bumpy." Her words hung between them, heavy with unspoken histories, Evie's own string of lovers, women who came and went like seasons in the mountains, leaving echoes of what-ifs. Riley looked out over the canopy, the city sprawling below like a living map of possibilities. "I know," she whispered, though doubt clung to her like dew. "But what if I'm the bumpy road?" Evie stepped closer, her hand finding Riley's, fingers interlacing with a gentleness that belied their strength. "Then I'll walk it with you." Every twist, every turn, the touch lingered, electric in the fading light. And for the first time since the breakup, Riley felt seen, not as a victim of loss, but as a woman remade in the fire of it. As they descended the path, the sun dipping behind the hills in a blaze of crimson and gold, Riley's wound throbbed less acutely. It was still there, a tender scar, but Evie's hand in hers was a promise. The rain would pass, and in its wake, something green and resilient might grow. Little did she know, the roots were already taking hold, deeper than friendship, in the fertile soil of shared silences and stolen glances. November arrived with a vengeance, the skies over Portland thickening to slate, mirroring the storm brewing inside Riley. The initial haze of Evie's arrival had lifted, revealing fissures in the foundation of their bond, cracks widened by proximity, by the intimacy of shared spaces that once held only echoes of absence. Theo's belongings lingered like ghosts, a forgotten jacket in the closet, a half-read novel on the nightstand, each a trigger that sent Riley spiraling into the what-ifs. She'd wake in the night, sheets twisted around her legs, the bed vast and cold, her mind replaying the voicemail until it warped into a dirge. Evie, ever the fixer, tried to bridge the gaps with gestures small and steadfast. She rearranged the studio, hanging Riley's sketches on the walls like talismans, their colors ochres and indigos, pushing back against the gloom. Evenings found them curled on the couch with episodes of old sitcoms, Evie's head on Riley's lap, her auburn waves spilling like autumn rivers. "See? They always figure it out," Evie would murmur during commercial breaks, her fingers absently stroking Riley's knee. But the levity felt forced, a thin veil over the undercurrent of tension. Started subtly, the unraveling. One afternoon, as they prepped for a craft fair in the Hawthorne district, Riley's prints displayed alongside Evie's handmade journals, the air between them crackled. Evie had suggested tweaking a design, her tone light but edged with critique. "Maybe soften the lines here. Make it less jagged." Riley's hand stilled on the canvas, the brush dripping cerulean like unshed tears. "Jagged? Is that what you think of me now?" The words escaped sharper than intended, laced with the poison of her insecurities. Evie recoiled, her emerald eyes widening in surprise. "Rye. That's not, I meant the art." But the damage was done. A spark igniting dry tinder. Riley turned away, her voice muffled against the sink as she washed the brush. "Everything feels jagged lately. Like I'm falling apart. And you're just watching." The accusation hung heavy, born of exhaustion, of nights spent staring at the ceiling while Evie slept soundly in the next room. Silence stretched, taut as a bowstring, until Evie crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, her hands gentle on Riley's shoulders. "I'm not watching. I'm here, fighting this with you." She spun Riley to face her, thumbs brushing away the paint smudged on her cheek. Close. Evie's freckles stood out like constellations, her breath warm against Riley's skin. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them, charged with something unnamed: desire? Fear? The line blurred, and Riley pulled away, mumbling an apology that tasted like ash. That night, the fracture deepened. They dined at a hole-in-the-wall in Selwood, plates of Dungeness crab steaming under Edison bulbs, the river murmuring beyond the windows. Conversation flowed in fits, skirting the afternoon's barb, until Evie broached the inevitable. "Have you thought about talking to someone? A therapist? I mean, Portland's got those sliding scale places by the bridges." Riley's fork clattered against porcelain, the sound slicing the hum of diners. "So now I'm broken enough for professional help?" Her laugh was brittle, a shield against the vulnerability Evie's words unearthed. "I thought you were enough. My best friend. Crashing my pity party." Evie's face fell, the hurt flickering like a candle in draft. "I am. Got right? I want to be. But it's eating you alive. And it's starting to eat us." She reached across the table, but Riley drew back, the booth feeling suddenly too small, the air too thick. They walked home in silence, the mist beating on their coats like unspoken regrets. Portland streets, lined with glowing shopfronts and the distant call of ferries on the Willamette, usually soothed Riley's soul. Tonight, they mocked her isolation. At the apartment, Evie lingered in the doorway of the spare room, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of a salt lamp. "I didn't come here to fix you," she said quietly, voice threaded with weariness. "I came because I can't stand the thought of you alone in this." Riley leaned against the wall, arms crossed like armor. "Then why does it feel like you're pulling away? Like you're seeing the mess and regretting the mess?" Tears pricked her eyes, hot and defiant. The truth clawed its way out, the fear that Evie, with her nomadic spirit and half-written dreams, would tire of the wreckage, pack her bag and vanish into the fog like so many before. Evie's response was a step forward, closing the distance until their breaths mingled. Regret you? Never. Her hand cupped Riley's jaw, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone, a touch so tender it bordered on reverence. Riley's pulse thrummed, a wild thing trapped beneath her ribs, as Evie's gaze dropped to her lips, fleeting, but enough to ignite a spark. The air hummed with possibility, the boundary between solace and something deeper dissolving like sugar in rain. But Riley shattered it, stepping back with a shaky exhale. I can't. Not now. Not like this. The words were a dam against the flood, born of loyalty to Theo's ghost, to the straight lines of her life she'd never questioned. Evie nodded, retreating with a grace that masked her own turmoil, the door clicking shut like a full stop. Alone in her bed, Riley curled into the pillows, the scent of Evie's vanilla lingering on the linens. Sleep evaded her, chased by visions of what-ifs, Evie's laugh echoing in empty rooms, her touch a memory faded to sepia. The breakup had cracked her open, but this pull toward her best friend was a chasm, yawning wider with every denied glance. Dawn crept in, gray and unforgiving, illuminating the fault lines, the love she mourned, the one she feared to name. The week that followed was a delicate dance of avoidance and amends. They cooked breakfasts of steel-cut oats and fresh blueberries from the co-op, conversations stitched with careful threads, weather, work, the latest indie flick at Cinema 21. Evie threw herself into her writing, the clack of keys from the studio a rhythmic heartbeat in the apartment's veins. Riley buried in deadlines, her designs blooming with sharper edges, vines twisting around fractured hearts. Yet the undercurrent persisted, manifesting in stolen moments. Evie's hand steadying Riley during a dizzy spell in the kitchen, their fingers lingering, a shared umbrella on a walk to Washington Park, shoulders pressed close against the gale. Each contact was a brushstroke on a canvas neither dared to finish, colors bleeding into uncertainty. One stormy Saturday, as thunder rumbled over the Tualatin Mountains, the dam broke. Riley found Evie on the fire escape, notebook in lap, rain pattering on the metal roof like impatient fingers. I miss him, Riley confessed, sliding down beside her, the words a confession long withheld. But I miss us more. The us before all this. Evie set the notebook aside, her profile etched in lightning's flash, strong jaw, full lips curved in quiet sorrow. Us is still here. Right. Bent. Maybe. But not broken. She turned, eyes searching Riley's face, finding the fear, the longing. What if we let it be what it wants to be? The question hung, electric as the storm, and Riley felt the world tilt. For the first time, she didn't pull away, her hand finding Evie's in the downpour, slick and sure. The rain washed over them, a baptism of sorts, blurring the lines between wound and wonder. In that suspended breath, the fracture began to mend, not seamlessly, but with the honest grit of gold leaf on cracked porcelain. As the tempest eased into drizzle, they retreated inside, towels and tea steaming on the counter. The apartment felt smaller, warmer, the ghosts receding into shadow. Riley slept that night with Evie's door cracked open, the soft cadence of her breathing a lullaby across the hall. The unraveling had exposed them, raw and real. But in the debris, seeds of something profound stirred, fragile, fierce, ready to root. December draped Portland in a cloak of frost-kissed evergreens, the city transforming into a watercolor of twinkling lights and iced sidewalks. Riley and Evie's fragile truce held, woven from tentative conversations over mulled wine at holiday markets, where the air hummed with cinnamon and the chatter of bundled strangers. The craft fair had been a quiet success. Riley's prints sold in whispers, Evie's journals snapped up by aspiring poets, leaving them with pockets full of cash and hearts buoyed by small victories. Yet the encounter on the fire escape lingered like the chill seeping through window panes, a question mark etched in frost. They filled the days with ritual, mornings at Tin Shed Garden Cafe, where steam rose from skillets of biscuits and gravy, conversation meandering from Evie's manuscript woes. These characters won't forgive each other, it's like they're stuck in my head. To Riley's sketches of the Columbia River Gorge, cliffs rising like ancient guardians. Afternoons blurred into collaborative bursts, Riley illustrating chapter headers for Evie's novel while Evie brewed pots of Earl Grey, her presence a steady hum in the background. It was during a drive to the coast, chasing the elusive winter sun, that the meeting deepened into revelation. The road to Cannon Beach wound through Tillamook State Forest, Douglas firs standing sentinel against the wind, their needles whispering secrets to the sky. Evie gripped the wheel of Riley's old Subaru, her flannel sleeves rolled up, radio tuned to a folk station crooning tales of lost loves and reclaimed roads. "Remember when we buried that time capsule here?" she asked, glancing sideways, her smile a flash of sunlight through clouds. Riley laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months, her boots propped on the dash. Junior year. Wine coolers, bad poetry, and that ridiculous pact to conquer the world by 30. The beach emerged like a dream. Haystack Rock a hulking silhouette against the slate waves, gulls wheeling overhead in erratic spirals. They parked and wandered the shore, boots sinking into wet sand, the tide pulling at their ankles like an old lover's grasp. The wind whipped Riley's curls into a frenzy, salt stinging her cheeks, but she felt alive, unmoored in the best way. Evie kicked at a clump of seaweed, unearthing a sand dollar, its fragile spines etched like lace. "For luck," she said, pressing it into Riley's palm, their fingers brushing, a spark that traveled up Riley's arm, settling warm in her chest. They sat on a driftwood log, the ocean's roar a symphony underscoring their silence, until Evie spoke, voice barely audible over the crash. "I've been running from this for years. You know. From feeling too much," her gaze fixed on the horizon, where sea met sky in an endless merge. "Back in Asheville, after my folks turned their backs, I built walls. Dated women who were safe, distant. But with you, it's different. Always has been." Riley's breath caught, the sand dollar cool against her skin. She thought of their college nights, sprawled on Evie's dorm bed trading dreams under string lights, the way Evie's hand had steadied her during panic attacks, a touch that lingered in memory like the scent of mountain laurel. "I never saw it," she admitted, voice trembling with the weight of realization. "Or maybe I did, and I was too scared to name it." The confession hung between them, buoyed by the salt air. As Evie turned, her eyes green as new leaves searching Riley's face. "Theo was a chapter, right? But we're the whole damn book. She leaned in.
Tentative.
Her lips brushing Riley's temple in a kiss soft as sea foam. It was chaste, a question rather than a claim. But it unlocked something in Riley, a flutter. Like wings testing the air after confinement. They drove back as dusk fell. Stars pricking the velvet sky. The radio now silent save for the hum of tires on asphalt. Conversation flowed freer. Laced with the tentative thrill of discovery. Evie's first crush on a girl in high school woodshop. Carving initials into oak. Riley's hidden journals filled with sketches of hands, feminine. Strong intertwined. Laughter bubbled up. Easing the knots of old fears. As they stopped at a roadside diner in Seaside for clam chowder. Bowls steaming under fluorescent glow. Back in the apartment. The meeting evolved into quiet intimacy. They strung lights along the exposed beams. Garlands of eucalyptus draping the mantel. Transforming the space into a haven of glow and shadow. One evening. As snow flurried outside, rare for Portland. A gift from the gods, they baked gingerbread. Flour dusting their cheeks like fresh powder. Evie's hip bumped Riley's at the counter. Deliberate now. Eliciting a giggle that dissolved into a gaze held too long. Tell me what you're afraid of, Evie whispered later. As they sipped cocoa by the window. The city blanketed in white. Riley hesitated. Then let the words spill. The judgment of her conservative aunts in Bend. The erasure of her straight girl history. The terror of loving so fiercely only to lose again. Evie listened. Her hand a steady weight on Riley's knee. Then shared her own shadows. The ache of family estrangement. The nomad's curse of half-belonging. In that exchange, barriers crumbled, replaced by bridges of understanding. They danced then, spontaneously, to a playlist of Joni Mitchell and Brandi Carlile, bodies swaying in the lamplight, Evie's arms around Riley's waist, a slow orbit that spoke volumes. No kisses yet. But touches multiplied. A hand on the small of the back guiding through doorways. Fingers combing through hair during movie nights. The air hummed with anticipation. A melody building toward crescendo. Holiday lights twinkled beyond the glass. Mirroring the sparks igniting within. Riley lay awake that night. Tracing the constellation of freckles on her ceiling. Imagined. But vivid, feeling the shift from fracture to fusion. Evie, in the next room, penned a new chapter in her novel, Two Women on a Windswept Shore. Hands clasped against the tide. Choosing each other amid the roar. The meeting wasn't fireworks, but embers steady, warming from within. As January loomed, crisp and full of promise, Riley glimpsed the horizon. Not a straight path, but a winding trail through ancient woods. Evie at her side. Map in hand. The journey had only begun. But in her best friend's emerald gaze, she found the courage to step forward. One footprint at a time. January's grip on Portland was unrelenting. Ice glazing the bridges like veins of quartz. The Willamette frozen in patches under a brittle sun. Riley and Evie's newfound closeness bloomed in the cold. Fragile petals unfurling against the frost. Conversations deepening into midnight confessions. Touches evolving from accidental to intentional. Yet understanding demanded reckoning. And forgiveness was no gentle rain. It came as a deluge. Washing away the silt of old hurts to reveal the bedrock beneath. The catalyst arrived unannounced. A letter forwarded from Theo's new address in Seattle, a crisp envelope with his looping script, postmarked from a high-rise overlooking Puget Sound. Riley found it slipped under the door one gray afternoon, her fingers trembling as she slid it open. Inside, pages of careful prose, apologies for the abrupt end, regrets over words unsaid, a plea for closure that read more like absolution for himself. "I hope you find the light you always chased," he wrote. "Even if I couldn't hold it with you." She read it alone in the studio, curled on the daybed amid half-finished canvases, tears blurring the ink. Anger surged first. How dare he? After the silence, the vanishing act. Then sorrow, a tide pulling her under. When Evie returned from a shift at a local bookstore, arms laden with second-hand romances and fresh sourdough, she found Riley adrift, the letter crumpled in her lap like a defeated flag. "Read it," Riley said, voice raw, thrusting the pages forward. Evie knelt before her, emerald eyes scanning the words with quiet intensity, her face a mask of composure cracking at the edges. When she finished, she set the letter aside, hands framing Riley's face. "He's wrong about you. You don't need his permission to shine." But the words unlocked a floodgate. Riley spoke then, of the nights she'd lain awake, replaying their last fight, blaming herself for not fighting harder, of the shame that had rooted deep, convincing her she was unworthy of love's wilder forms. "I forgave him in my head," she whispered. "But my heart, it's still locked." Evie nodded, pulling her close, their foreheads touching in the dim light. "Forgiveness isn't erasure, right? It's making space." That night, they burned the letter in the sink, a ritual of release. Flames dancing blue under the faucet's hiss, smoke curling like spirits ascending. Ashes swirled down the drain, carried to the river, and with them, a measure of Riley's grudge dissolved. Evie's turn came days later, during a rare clear spell when they escaped to the Oregon Coast Aquarium in Newport. The drive was companionable, windows cracked to let in the brine-scented wind, playlists shuffling between Lucinda Williams ballads and upbeat indie folk. Inside the aquarium, bioluminescent jellyfish pulsed in tanks like living stars, their glow a counterpoint to the shadows Riley sensed in Evie's posture. They paused before the sea otter exhibit, sleek forms twisting through kelp in effortless grace. "I need to tell you something," Evie said, voice pitched low amid the murmur of families. Her eyes fixed on the water, avoiding Riley's. "About why I really left Asheville." It wasn't just the coming out. Riley's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You don't have to." But Evie pressed on, words tumbling like pebbles into a stream. "My sister, Clara, she was my shadow. Always. When I told the family, she stood by me at first. But then, she chose them. Said I was tearing us apart. That my phase was selfish." The pain etched her features, old wounds reopening, the holidays endured in silence, the letters unanswered, the guilt that had propelled Evie westward, chasing reinvention in Seattle's rain. Riley listened, heart aching with the echo of her own losses, the divorce that splintered her parents, leaving her to navigate love's minefields alone. "She was wrong," she said fiercely, pulling Evie into a shadowed alcove, away from prying eyes. "You didn't tear anything. You were brave. And that bravery brought you to me." Tears welled in Evie's eyes, spilling over as Riley wiped them away with her thumbs. "I forgive her. Mostly. but forgiving myself for leaving without a fight, for building walls so high. That's harder. Her voice broke, and Riley gathered her close, their embrace a fortress against the tide of memory. In that moment, amid the hum of filters and distant laughter, understanding flowered, forgiveness as a mutual unburdening, a key turning in tandem locks. They drove home through twilight, stopping at a bluff overlooking the Pacific, where waves hurled themselves against basalt cliffs in ageless fury. Evie leaned on the hood, Riley beside her, arms linked. "Thank you," Evie murmured, turning to press a kiss to Riley's knuckles, soft, lingering, a seal on their shared absolution. The sun dipped low, painting the sea in strokes of rose and amber, and Riley felt the weight lift, not entirely, but enough to breathe deeper. Back in Portland, the thaw extended inward. They hosted a small gathering, friends from university days, gathered around a feast of potluck tamales and Marionberry pie, laughter filling the apartment like sunlight after storm. Evie read from her manuscript, voice steady, words weaving tales of mountain women finding grace in ruin. Riley watched, pride swelling, her sketches now illustrations in the pages, vines of forgiveness entwining fractured boughs. Nights grew intimate, boundaries softening like wax under flame. They shared the couch unapologetically, Evie's head on Riley's shoulder, fingers tracing lazy circles on collarbones exposed by slipped necklines. Conversations turned philosophical under the duvet's cocoon, the nature of grace, how pain forges empathy's blade. "You taught me that," Riley confessed one dawn, as snowmelt dripped from eaves. "Seeing you carry your scars like badges. It makes mine feel less like chains." Evie smiled, sleepy and soft, pulling her closer. "We're mirrors. You and I. Reflecting back the light we need." Their lips met then. Tentative, a brush of warmth, tasting of chamomile and hope. It was brief, a promise rather than possession, but it ignited the core of them, forgiveness's ember flaring to life. As February whispered at the door, petals of crocus pushing through frozen earth, Riley and Evie stood on the precipice of rebirth. The hurts hadn't vanished. Echoes lingered in quiet moments, in letters unsent, but understanding had built a trellis, and forgiveness climbed it, green and tenacious. In each other's arms, they glimpsed the horizon, not flawless, but fertile, ready for what bloomed next. February unfurled in Portland like a hesitant bloom, cherry blossoms tentative against the lingering chill, the air alive with the promise of thaw. Riley and Evie's world had shifted irrevocably, the kiss on that snowmelt morning a threshold crossed, leading to a renaissance painted in subtle strokes, shared sunrises on the balcony, where steam from mugs mingled with breath, evenings tracing constellations from the rooftop, fingers linked as if mapping their own expanding universe. Rebirth wasn't linear, a tidy arc from ashes to apex, but a spiral, days of dizzying joy laced with echoes of doubt, nights where old phantoms stirred only to be gently ushered out. Riley threw herself into her art with renewed fervor, the print shop dream crystallizing into action. She scouted spaces in the Alberta Arts District, narrow storefronts with wide windows framing visions of exposed brick and rolling racks of limited edition posters. Evie was her co-conspirator. Spreadsheets of budgets scribbled on napkins over breakfast at Coava Coffee, her southern pragmatism grounding Riley's flights of fancy. "You're glowing," a mutual friend remarked at a gallery opening in the Pearl District, where Riley's exhibit, landscapes fractured and reformed, waves crashing into wildflower meadows, drew murmurs of admiration. She stood beside Evie, clad in a simple black dress that hugged her slender frame, chestnut curls pinned loosely, hazel eyes catching the light like polished amber. Evie's hand rested at the small of her back, a subtle anchor, her emerald gaze sweeping the room with quiet pride. The validation fueled Riley's momentum. She quit her freelance grind for a part-time gig at a design co-op, freeing hours to curate the shop's vision, sustainable inks, collaborations with local poets like Evie. The act of creation became her rebirth, each brushstroke a reclamation of space, of self, of the woman Theo had dimmed but never extinguished. Evie, too, shed skins. Her manuscript, once stalled in the mire of unresolved ghosts, surged forward, chapters pouring out in feverish bursts. They celebrated milestones with rituals, a bottle of Oregon Pinot at sunset on the steel bridge, toasts to new beginnings clinking like wind chimes. But rebirth demanded confrontation, and Riley's lingered in the form of confrontation with her past. The call came mid-month. Her mother from Bend, voice tentative over the crackle of line, laced with the dry warmth of high desert winds. Heard about the breakup, honey. And the rest. Riley's grip tightened on the phone, Evie pausing mid-chop in the kitchen, knife stilling on carrots. The rest, the unspoken shift to Evie, the love that had always simmered, now brought to boil. They met in a neutral ground, a cafe in Sisters, ponderosa pines framing the windows, the scent of pinyon coffee thick in the air. Riley's mother, Lydia, arrived with silver threading her bob, lines etched deeper around eyes the same hazel as her daughter's. Conversation danced around edges, whether Riley's art, until Lydia set down her mug, hands folding like prayer. I know I wasn't there when you needed me. After the divorce, I shut down. But seeing you now, with her Evie, it makes sense. You've always had that light, even when I couldn't see it. Tears pricked Riley's eyes. The forgiveness from part for extending outward. A ripple in still water. I needed you to try, she said, voice steady. But I'm okay now. More than okay. They hugged then. Brief but bone deep. A mending of frayed threads. Driving back with Evie at the wheel, cascades blurring past, Riley felt the spiral ascend. Wounds transmuted to wisdom. The girl who'd hidden in sketches now stepping into her palette's full spectrum. Evie's rebirth mirrored in subtler shades. A letter from Clara arrived. Forwarded from Asheville, parchment thin, scented faintly of honeysuckle. I've been reading your old emails, it began. And I see now what I pushed away. I'm sorry, Evie. For the silence. For the walls I helped build. Evie read it aloud by the fire. Voice quavering. Riley's arms around her from behind. Chin on shoulder. The response was a video call. Pixels bridging mountains and miles. Clara's face filled the screen. Older. Softer. A toddler, her niece gurgling in the background. Apologies flowed. Raw and real. Laced with laughter over shared childhood follies. Sneaking bourbon from the pantry. Stargazing on barn roofs. Come home, Clara urged. Not forever. But enough to heal. Evie glanced at Riley. eyes shimmering. "Home's where she is," she said simply. And the screen went still. Clara's not a benediction. The call ended. But the rebirth took root, Evie booking tickets for a spring visit. Not as a prodigal, but a woman whole. Scars honored as maps. Their love, too, renewed in these waters. Mornings found them tangled in sheets. Lazy kisses tracing collarbones. Bodies learning the language of curve and hollow without haste. It was reverent, exploratory, fingers mapping freckles like braille, breath sinking to the rhythm of rain on roof. No urgency. Only presence. Evie's whisper of beautiful against Riley's temple. Riley's hand in auburn waves, grounding them both. One equinox eve, they hiked Multnomah Falls. Mist rising like spirits from the Cascades' roar. At the bridge, water thundering below, Evie pulled a small box from her pocket. Inside, matching pendants, sand dollars, etched with vines. "For the shore we claimed," she said, clasping Riley's around her neck. They kissed there, full and unhurried. The world falling away to the pulse of water and want. Rebirth, Riley realized, was this not erasure of the old, but integration, the breakups ache fueling fiercer love, fractures allowing light's intricate dance. As March beckoned with longer days, her print shop lease signed, Evie's manuscript querying agents, they stood taller. Intertwined roots breaking stone. The spiral turned upward, petals unfolding to the sun. March swept into Portland on wings of renewal, the cherry blossoms exploding in pink confetti along the boulevards, the Willamette shimmering under skies that stretched blue and boundless. Riley's print shop, dubbed Vine and Vellum, opened its doors in a flutter of ribbon cuttings and well-wishers. The space alive with the scent of fresh ink and pressed paper, shelves groaning under folios of botanical illustrations. A corner dedicated to Evie's journals, leather-bound tomes whispering of mountain lore. The launch party hummed with locals, artists toasting with craft ciders, poets reciting verses amid the rustle of pages. Riley moved through it like a dream, her black blouse tucked into wide-leg trousers, hazel eyes alight, Evie's hand a secret warmth at her elbow. "This is you," Evie murmured later. As the crowd thinned, confetti of torn wrapping littering the floor like fallen petals. Bold lines, hidden depths, her kiss, stolen behind a display of letterpress cards, tasted of elderflower and eternity, a seal on the life's work born from ruin. The light after darkness wasn't blinding, but diffuse, golden through boughs heavy with new growth. Their days wove into a tapestry of ordinary miracles, bike rides to the Saturday market, baskets brimming with tulips and goat cheese, picnics in Laurelhurst Park, where ducks skimmed the lagoon and Evie read drafts aloud, Riley sketching her profile against the willows, strong nose, lips curved in concentration. Love, in this phase, was the quiet alchemy of presence, Evie's notes tucked into lunch bags. For the woman who colors my world, Riley's playlists curated for road trips south, weaving through the Willamette Valley's vine-draped hills. Yet the journey's arc held its hoar, reminders that light casts shadows. A rainy afternoon found Riley sorting old photos, Theo's face surfacing like driftwood on the tide. Melancholy tug, a hoarfrost on her joy, until Evie joined her on the floor, album in lap. "He was part of the path," she said, tracing a finger over a faded snapshot of Riley laughing at a bonfire. "But this is the vista." They drove to the coast that weekend, chasing the equinox's afterglow. The Subaru hugging curves past Tillamook's dairy barns, radio alive with spring anthems. At Hug Point, where waves sculpted caves from sandstone, they walked barefoot, foam-licking toes, collecting agates polished smooth by time. Evie spoke of her Asheville trip planned for May. A weekend, not a chain, her voice steady. The forgiveness a foundation now, not fragile ice. Riley nodded, heart full. And I'll be here. Holding the map, they built a cairn on the beach. Stones stacked in memory of shed skins. One for Theo's ghost. One for Clara's silence. Others for the selves they'd outgrown. As tide rose, reclaiming the pile, they watched from higher ground, arms entwined. The seas sung a hymn of release. Back home, the shop thrived. Custom orders for weddings, commissions from galleries in Seattle, while Evie's agent buzzed with interest in her manuscript. Echoes in the Laurel, a tale of sisters mending under smoky skies. Celebrations marked the milestones. A dinner at Lou Pigeon, duck confit melting on tongues, toasts to futures unbound. Nights deepened their bond. Bodies entwined in the queen bed they'd pushed against the window. City lights winking like distant fires. Lovemaking was a language honed, slow explorations under moonlight. Whispers of need and name. The curve of hip under palm a sacred geography. One dawn, as April's wildflowers carpeted the meadows of Sauvie Island, they woke to that pivotal morning, the one whispered in the title of their story. Sun filtered through gauzy curtains, gilding the room in honeyed warmth. Riley stirred first, awareness dawning with the realization. Evie's body curved against hers, legs tangled, arms wrapped in a hold both protective and profound. No alcohol, no storm-tossed night, just the natural migration and sleep. Bodies seeking the solace they'd claimed awake. Evie's breath feathered Riley's neck, steady and sure. Her auburn hair splayed across the pillow like a halo. Riley shifted, tracing the freckles on Evie's shoulder, a constellation she'd memorized. Eyes fluttered open, emerald meeting hazel, and a smile bloomed, slow and shared. Morning, Evie murmured, voice husky with sleep, her hand sliding up Riley's back in lazy affirmation. Morning, Riley echoed, the word of vow. As they lingered in the embrace, hearts sinking to the distant call of morning doves. No words for the profundity, it was felt in the press of skin. The unspoken "this is home." They rose eventually, padding to the kitchen for pancakes, blueberry-studded, golden-edged, eaten at the counter. Knees bumping, laughter bubbling over syrup spills. The day unfolded in lightness, a wander through the International Rose Test Garden. Petals unfurling in riots of crimson and blush. An impromptu jam session with ukuleles borrowed from the shop. Evie's chords weaving melodies of makeshift lyrics. From rain to root. We grew. As evening fell, they climbed to the apartment roof. Blankets spread under stars emerging one by one. Portland skyline a silhouette of spires and glow. Lying side by side, fingers laced, Riley turned to Evie. I used to think love was a straight line, start to finish. No detours. But you made it a river. Twisting, deep, carrying me to places I never dreamed. Evie propped on elbow, gaze tender. And I'll keep carrying you. Right. Through floods, through calms. Their kiss was the day's coda. Soft as starlight, sealing the light they'd forged from dark. In the months that followed summer's lazy haze, Evie's book delinked, Riley's shop expanding to workshops, their story rippled outward, touching lives with quiet ripples. Visits to Bend mended more threads. Clara's arrival in June, a bridge crossed with tentative steps. Doubts surfaced. As they do, nights when old fears whispered of impermanence, but they met them with grace. Hands held in the hush. The morning they woke holding each other became legend in their private lore. The pivot. The proof that from breakup's abyss, rebirth could cradle you close. As autumn circled back, leaves turning in fiery tribute, Riley and Evie stood on the cusp of whatever came next, not an end, but an ellipsis, brimming with faith. Love, they knew, was the ultimate redemption, a light not conquered, but kindled, warm against the world's vast, whispering wild. And in that warmth, they thrived, two women, intertwined, blooming eternal in the garden of second chances.